This is Jackie Clement, CEO and Executive Director of the Fair Media Council. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's event, which is National News Forecast, People, Stories, and Issues to Watch in 2022. We have a great panel with us today. In fact, they're so good. We had the same group last year, and they're back by popular demand because the response was so great. But before I introduce our folks, I just want to let you know that today's event has been sponsored by Northwell Health, Henry Schein, Protiviti, St. Joseph's College, the Bartow Law Firm, and Hofstra University. This event would not be made possible without their help, so we do thank them for allowing us to do this. And this event is part of a event that is actually carrying out throughout the month of January this year. It's called the News Conference, Real and Powerful. So we kicked off earlier in the month with noted presidential historian Douglas Brinkley giving his assessment of Biden's first year. And then we went inside the pandemic with acclaimed science journalist Lori Garrett to tell us a little bit about how we're faring with the pandemic and things that maybe the mainstream media has overlooked when it comes to science reporting. And yesterday we went inside New York politics. Now, all of those sessions are available for viewing on our website at fairmediacouncil.org. And then that brings us to today with the national forecast. And running today's panel is Liz Benjamin, the Managing Director of Marathon Strategies. Tom Brune, Newsday's Washington Bureau Chief, joins us, as well as Robert A. George, the Bloomberg Opinion editorial writer, and Dave Leventhal, who is at The Insider as Deputy Washington Bureau Chief. So the only piece of advice I have for you folks is we have one rule with these panel discussions, and that is we have no rule. So I leave it up to you. Liz, take it away.
I thought she was going to tell us not to swear, but apparently everything is on the table. So there you go. It's really, we're at a moment in time that I think is very difficult to encapsulate. And right now, and I think first of all, welcome back, gentlemen. It's nice to see you. A year. So apparently we set our bar rather high. So, no pressure or anything. But we're at a moment where, we've just passed the first year of the Biden presidency, the first anniversary mark. And I don't know that things could be going much worse for this president, to be honest. We're on the brink of a significant international incident between the Ukraine and Russia. Not sure what to call that yet. We have a major inflation problem. Here, we still have shortages of goods, particularly in the semiconductor industry. The president's numbers are not good. I guess one could say that the retirement of Justice Breyer gives him an opportunity to hit the reset button. But I also want to put the caveat out there that I feel like we've heard the phrase opportunity to hit the reset button a lot of late. The voting rights speech was another opportunity to hit the reset button, and some people loved it and some people hated it. So I think that, I guess I'll start, Dave, with you, and then sort of work my way up the chain because Robert is right underneath me here. I mean, I guess my first question is, how bad is it for Biden?
Well, it is bad by any objective definition, but you don't even need that. All you need to do is compare Joe Biden's aspirations from his agenda when he was running as president in 2020 to the reality of where his agenda is today, a year on. Now, this is a 4-year presidency. You're not going to accomplish everything that you want to accomplish in the span of 1/4 of that time. And there have been some victories for Joe Biden. The infrastructure package that did pass in the fashion that it passed in, which is less ambitious than he wanted, but still, nevertheless, something quite monumental when you compare it to recent or even beyond recent history. That is certainly a big victory for him. But then you look at all the things that have not happened, and that's huge. And it's coming at a time too when, even though it is just 1 year forward, we're hitting the teeth of the next midterm election coming in. The Democrats have as narrow a majority in the Senate as humanly possible. They have a very tenuous majority in the House, and it's entirely possible that both the House and the Senate could be lost to Democrats. So unless Joe Biden is able to have some more of those victories, it's entirely possible, using history as our guide, knowing first-term presidents and just the reality on the ground, politically and otherwise, that Joe Biden could be entering the final 2 years of his first term with a Congress that simply is not going to be open to really anything that Joe Biden wants to do. So it is crunch time in a major, major way for Joe Biden. And I would just close by saying that some of the failures or some of the losses that Joe Biden's had in his first year have not been because Republicans necessarily have been stopping it or being obstructionists. I mean, these are intramural fights that have been happening within the Democratic Party, and is something that's thrown a huge, huge wet blanket on Democratic voters in a way, saying, well, wait a second, we were promised all this great stuff and we were going to go forward and we were going to be aggressive, and then Kirsten Sinema happened and Joe Manchin happened, and that's really, you're starting to see that infighting. I think that if we're looking for a storyline in 2022 is going beyond just Republican versus Democrat, Democrat versus Democrat. I mean, we're in this bizarre situation where Democrats are literally actively fundraising off of beating up on other Democrats.
But Republicans are doing that too, just to be fair. I mean, let's be fair. You've also got Trump versus DeSantis or Trump versus whomever, right? I mean, there's certainly, look, the Democrats are the party in power, and so they're the party we love to hate because they've got the biggest target on their back. But Tom, is this even fair? I mean, first of all, yes, maybe it was, Biden's mistake. I mean, nobody comes in without putting forward a really aggressive agenda, but he had to deal with COVID. And that was the first thing that he had to deal with. And like some people will say, he didn't do so well, like where were the testing protocols? I was just listening this morning to, after hearing the reports about the battle between Neil Young and Spotify and Joe Rogan, which is really interesting. And we could, all of this, you could discuss anything, everything's political these days. We could even spend a whole time discussing that, but we don't have vaccine mandates to fly on airlines, which some people would have liked to have seen him do, right? He wasn't as aggressive as they wanted him to be. So maybe on all counts, if he came in with the main thing he had to deal with COVID, and he dealt with nothing else, he couldn't even get that right.
Well, he has struggled with that, and there's been very mixed messaging, which is very disturbing. I got to say, personally, and this may be something that happened across the country, when your top leaders in healthcare come out and say everybody is probably going to get it anyway.
Right.
What incentive does that give me to take precautions? And I think that was mixed messaging. I had hoped that they would be better. But I think the real problem he has is that he and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, New York's own, right, set a very high bar for what they could accomplish. And they did it with the narrowest of majorities. They did it without having all their ducks in line. And I think that has just totally demoralized Democrats. And you look at the polls, and Biden has a 42% approval rating, which is down from 55 or something when he first became president. And that's the second lowest in the history of a first-year president. Yeah. And you can only guess who the lowest was.
Right.
That was the previous president, right? And part of that is we're in a time of incredible partisanship. And that makes it very, very hard to get anything done. I think that Chuck Schumer, deserves a little bit of the blame here. I'm not sure exactly what his strategy was in making these deals with Manchin and Sinema and not telling anybody. I think that he promised a lot and he thought he could deliver it and he couldn't. And so looking forward a little bit, I do think Democrats really see this Supreme Court confirmation process as a way of trying to change the stream a little bit.
Well, before we leave that topic, and Robert, I do want you to sort of give your opportunity to sort of lay down your mark, right, to start the conversation. But how could something go really badly with the Supreme Court? I mean, that's not a natural win, right? They don't have the filibuster problem, right? That's not a problem, even though they lost the filibuster fight on the voting rights bills. But the Republicans could really make things difficult, could they not?
Well, never underestimate the Democrats' ability to take a sure win and put it into the dumpster.
Oh, Robert.
Well, you know, I hate to be overly critical here, but I mean there is a great example. I mean, I think like the last year has been a number of examples of Democrats, taking a win and turning it into something of a loss. I mean, if you look back objectively and said the new president got his American Recovery Plan through a very divided Congress. It got a bipartisan infrastructure plan, which had been literally a punchline for the last 4 years. You know,
Right.
Infrastructure Week, Infrastructure Week, and then they then bizarrely, tied that to this much more complicated, controversial construct, Build Back Better, which led into 6 months of, as my colleagues were just saying, of Democrats fighting amongst themselves, buying into that classic political trope of Democrats in disarray. So for 6 months, the public just hears Democrats fighting amongst each other while Omicron is surging,
Right.
which that old, the line that the kids use these days, you had one job. I mean, Biden was elected.
Is that what they're saying?
Well, no, Biden was elected, because he wasn't Donald Trump and he's not tweeting every second, but also because he basically kind of promised to focus like a hawk on the coronavirus, and he had early successes with the vaccine rollout, and then they basically admit that they were kind of caught off guard with Omicron. As you pointed out, they weren't ready. With testing. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can lay at their feet in terms of bad planning, incompetence, and so forth. Now there are some things. Biden perhaps was legitimately caught off guard by the partisan partisan resistance to taking vaccines, and that maybe is something that you can't really blame him for. But there was a lot. There's a lot that you can blame him on lack of planning. You can blame Chuck Schumer on for not being able to try and keep some of these divisions amongst the Democrats in house. But it does set them up for a hard slog this year, notwithstanding the fact that the Supreme Court battle could turn out to be a good win for the Democrats.
Well, and so speaking of the Supreme Court, the potential decision around abortion rights re-energize the grassroots on the left, right? I mean, there's a lot of coulds that could occur. One of the things that I think that we're leaving out, and there's some interesting questions that just came through that are New York related, and I want to get to them, but I do want to just point this out. Some of it is our fault. I don't mean reporters, because I'm not one of you anymore, but I mean like the electorate, the people. We are cynical. We are exhausted. We are tired. We can't, don't you think that plays into this to some degree, this sort of zeitgeist of the American people? Maybe we expected too much from this guy. We thought that he was going to come in and fix everything. He can't fix a virus. It's not possible.
But he came in promising a lot. And we forget, because, in a year's time, we forget these things. I mean, the fact that the Democrats are in control of government right now is a miracle. Who would have thought that they would win 2 Senate seats in Georgia, of all places, Georgia? I mean, that has been so red for so long. The fact that they could pull that off, the fact that they have a majority in the Senate is a miracle. So,
Right.
So I think we have to remember that as well. I mean, I think that's part of it also.
Well, I mean, also what president, what candidate ever got in by under promising? I mean, look, the best possible thing that you could do is set your bar low so then you can overshoot your bar and then declare what an amazing victory you've had. But, no candidate does that. No candidate comes in and says, I'm going to be a fairly mediocre, successful president. Like, no, nobody does that.
But Biden really campaigned on return to normalcy, right? And after 4 years of a president whose main thing was to win the media every day, right? To go to somebody that is, look, on the weekends, Joe Biden disappears totally. I mean, and he has been much lower key on so many, fronts. So I think that's part of it also. I think there was a sense that they could do more than they could actually do. And it's much easier in any legislative body, in any government, to stop something than pass something. I mean, this has been proven over the years, right? And I mean, when you look back at the big successes of the past, it's when they've had a huge majority in the Senate. Take a look at the Great Society. Take a look at the FDR New Deal. That they had super majority, numbers in Congress that they could pass anything they wanted. So I mean, it's very, very hard now.
Go ahead, Robert.
Liz, you said maybe the voters are to blame, and there is something to that. Though we should point out that very few politicians ever got anywhere by blaming the voters.
I know. I'm not suggesting that you should turn the finger on the point the finger.
But you make a good point. That there was great frustration over the 4 years because of the previous guys, tweeting all the time, and I know journalists were always frustrated. We've got a storyline set for the whole weekend, and then he decides to tweet something out on a Saturday, and everything gets scrambled, and he was in our face 24/7, and the public said, oh, he's just exhausting. Then comes in Joe Biden, and as Tom said, he kind of vanishes for the weekend. And now the criticism is, where's Joe Biden? He's just like Trump said, he's Sleepy Joe. He's not doing anything. He's not doing that. There is this kind of sense of that the public doesn't know what it wants. It's like Gladiator. Are you not entertained? No, we're not entertained. We need something more. We need something more. But there is, again, I think we do need to underscore this point that Trump arguably was incompetent on a lot of just on basic managing skills, but the fact that he was always out there, he was always selling his agenda, even if it was vaporware, even if he couldn't actually sell it, he was always out there selling it. Whereas Biden has some things that he could actually sell, but except for a few times where he jumps into the spotlight to say something, it doesn't sound like he's actually selling something. One exception to that, and I think I give him a little bit more credit than some critics do, was his press conference. I mean, yes, he had some errors in there, particularly on Russia.
Press conference, that one.
What?
Peter Ducey press conference? Not that
no,
one.
no, not that. No. His news conference, his
the 1 year anniversary. The 1 year anniversary.
2-hour marathon. He had a couple of errors in there, like on the Russia and Ukraine, absolutely. But he stood up there for 2 hours and took question after question after question, which I can't remember the last time there was a 2-hour presidential news conference. And considering how there's some criticism that he's too sleepy or he's too weak for the job, I thought that kind of turned that question on its head.
Well, interestingly, okay. So, well, first of all, I would argue that Donald Trump wasn't selling an agenda. He was selling Donald Trump. And he was also, every time there was going to be something that was negative in the news, he would get out and say something salacious or sexy or bombshelly or something he couldn't back up. And that would change the story, and it would change the headlines, to your point about driving journalists absolutely bananas. One thing, Dave, I'm curious about, I mean, we were talking about, or I think it was Tom who brought it up, but I know everybody's thinking it, like, we're headed towards a bloodbath. The Dems are going to lose the House. Dems might lose the Senate. Where's Biden going to be then? I mean, New York, of course, is our focus specifically here, but we've got a redistricting process in New York. It's in a disarray, which is not surprising. We've also got some retirements. We've got some combinations of districts reporting, I think in Robert's former paper, the New York Post, that the Dems are going to go after Malliotakis, who is the lone New York City GOP congresswoman. The question is how hard back in the bad old days, you would see the Republicans had a state by state strategy where they really sought to influence at the state level redistricting because they knew that it would bubble up, just like they would seek to influence judicial nominations, right? Appointments at the lower level, knowing that that was going to be a legacy issue going forward. How hard are the Democrats going to get involved, particularly in New York? And, and really what kind of danger are they in? They in the red zone at this point? Like we might as well just write it off, foregone conclusion, going to be a bloodbath, forget it.
Well, at least in New York State specifically, I mean, New York State remains a incredibly blue state. So I don't think, New York is at any great risk of there being some, Republican bloodbath. If you're a Democrat and you're like, are the Republicans going to take over New York State?
No, but we saw some GOP wins in the last electoral cycle that were surprising, which we'll get to in a second, because it really does play into the Eric Adams question. And where is the Democratic Party going? Are they going to be the Black Lives Matter uber progressive party? Are they going to be the centrist public safety, former police officer, Eric Adams party? I don't know the answer, but first redistricting.
Redistricting is a national phenomenon. I would imagine that nothing material is going to change this time around. It is a state by state by state system. Everyone has the ability to run their system the way it is. I mean, it's 50 mini systems all across the country. So what is happening?
Broken, dysfunctional systems.
and look, at the national level, would Democrats absolutely love to change that or somehow, create a national law or a nationalized standard for gerrymandering to do away with that, or otherwise try to make redistricting fair? Not going to happen. Not going to happen this time around. Probably won't happen 10 years from now. We can't predict the future. But that is a factor that plays into sort of this, broader part of the tapestry with Democrats where, and Liz, you said it a moment ago, Joe Biden ran on this notion of a return to normalcy. All we have to do is go back, 100 odd years to look at the last time a president ran on a return to normalcy. It was Warren G. Harding. And guess what happened? We did not return to normalcy. In fact, it was a very abnormal presidential administration that he had, one that ended in scandal and Warren G. Harding dying while in office. So voters became very, concerned about that, to say the least. So for Joe Biden, and especially when it comes to the news coverage of all of this and the story that I think we can expect to play out over the course of 2022, if he is not able to engender trust with the electorate, not able to prove to voters that a return to normalcy is real and give them tangible examples of that return to normalcy, whether it be COVID, whether it be the economy, whether it be legislating in a way that is, John McCain used to like to say regular order. Well, there is nothing regular about the way that Washington is working right now. So Joe Biden is going to have to, like he did at his press conference, stand on his own 2 feet and defend his agenda, regardless of whether it's his fault or not. He did run on this very thing, and he's going to have to prove that he has done something that voters can hang their hat on, that is going to convince them and inspire them too, because you got to get people to turn out at the polls to go and vote for Democrats as opposed to Republicans, or even show up in the first place at all.
Right. Well, 2 things. First of all, now that I'm on this side, the not aisle, this side of the operation, it was bad messaging, right? The idea that we're going to return to normalcy. What does normalcy even look like anymore? Right. I don't even think anybody knows, right? So you can go to the movies, you can take off your mask, you can, will people still want to? I don't know, right?
But let me jump in for 10 seconds just to say one return to the biggest return to normalcy was that we were going to return to 2019 normalcy in terms of living our daily lives. And it looked like things were going in that direction. And hey, viruses are viruses, and they're going to do their thing. But
Right.
Joe Biden didn't help himself in a lot of regards in trying to get ahead of changes in the way that the COVID-19 pandemic has ultimately gone forward,
Go
and
ahead,
playing a lot of catch up
Robert.
right now with sending masks and tests out a year after he's
Yeah.
taken president. That
Yes.
those have been things that he did control in a situation that is largely uncontrollable, but that he ultimately his administration probably didn't do the best job that they possibly could.
And related to that, Dave, is I think a really major vulnerable point that the Democrats have on that is this issue of masking, and quite related to that are the schools. We saw some hints of that down in Virginia, but now you're starting to see it, even in like really solid blue New York City. This kind of a frustration with, well, if Omicron is going to be everywhere, and we don't have vaccines for kids under the age of 5. Even before Omicron came along, there was little evidence that COVID was as dangerous to kids as it was to adults. Teachers have been vaccinated. Have been vaccinated. What do we need to keep this masking regime in place in the schools in quite this kind of a faction? And you're seeing there's a whole lot of disagreement even among Democrats, and again even in the blue regions. And while schools and so forth are local issues, any kind of a signal that a Biden administration can give to try and make things more normal for those parents, I think is going to redound to him and to the Democrats.
Okay, but this is where we get into the question, right? We're also seeing RFK Jr. and his now wife, who can't agree on vaccine protocol, or at least on the way that they disagree on whether it's appropriate to bring
compare it to the Holocaust. Yeah, but slightly.
Right. Yeah, they're not on the same page. But I guess the point is, that's an extreme example. The question is, when you say, Dave, you say Joe Biden needs to somehow get the electorate excited to go out and vote, assuming that it's safe to do so, blah, blah, et cetera. Assuming that we get back to some semblance of normalcy. Which Democrats is he suggesting you go vote for? Any Democrats? Manchin Democrats? Kristen Sinema Democrats? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez Democrats? Eric Adams Democrats? They are not a monolith, nor are the Republicans, to be clear. But again, we're focused on the party in power, and the party in power is the Democrats. So it's a war for the soul of the Democratic Party. I feel like I've said that. I used to say it when we had the Tea Party, and then now I'm saying it: progressives versus pragmatists or centrists in the Democratic Party. Maybe this is an age-old story and it's been going on forever. I'm not as up on my Harding era politics as you are. So, but I guess the point is,
good thing.
I guess it's not, it seems to be like, who's going to win? And there's all these warnings, right? Warnings on Long Island, Tom, for example, from the state party chairman, who I'm sort of surprised still has that position, but we'll see how much longer he does, Jay Jacobs, who was very much an Andrew Cuomo guy, and is like, if you go along this line, you're do so at your peril, you're going to lose the suburbs, and look at that. They lost the suburbs, right? And what does that mean going forward?
Yeah, okay. So I think there is going to be some battles, some intra-party battles in the Democratic Party, but I also think there's going to be a sense that without a majority, we can't do anything. And this takes us back to the whole redistricting thing that you brought up a little bit earlier, right?
Yeah.
I think the Democrats are really relying on the blue states, particularly New York, to actually counter so much of what's going on in the red states. The red states are really working hard to redistrict out as many Democrats as they can. And I think, I think the plan in New York is to get down the Republican representation to like 3. from 6 or 7 what it is now, right?
Well, one of them's
And-
going to take himself out by running against Kathy Hochul anyway. So, that's -1.
Well, I don't know if that's true. I mean, that's Suffolk County. You know Suffolk County, Liz. That's
do.
very conservative, right?
Yep.
So it's not a done deal. I do think it's kind of amazing, since this is a little bit Long Islandish. You've got 2 congressmen running for governor.
Oh, I forgot. Oh man, Tom
Right,
Swazi would be so mad at me.
Representative Tom Swazi is doing this. Nobody can quite understand exactly why he's doing this, because it seems like Governor Hochul is doing fine, right? I mean, she's doing great in the polls, but he really, really wants it, right? And Lee Zeldin's been running since last year. I mean, and I think he is going to be the Republican candidate most likely.
Probably.
And that opens that seat up, right?
Yep.
So this gives a lot of opportunities for the redistricting that's going to go on through the Democratic legislature to really tilt things toward Democrats. And I think that's going on in a number of blue states, and they're relying on that. And it's certainly going on in the red states.
It's turning out that because the Democrats thought that the Democrats have been wanting to go nationally, have been wanting to have like some kind of state by state nonpartisan commission approach, and Republicans have resisted them everywhere. And so they were looking at what they thought was going to be kind of a Republican slaughter in terms of redistricting in the red states. But the Democrats, when they realized that they weren't going to get any of the kind of commission reform, they've gone just as aggressive, and they could. A hyper aggressive redistricting map in New York could wipe out as many as 5 Republican districts, and you could have as few as three Republicans in the entire
delegation. Yeah.
Delegation. Thank you. Congregation. Delegation.
Well,
yes.
Congressional delegation. It was you merge those together. It's actually kind of interesting from a religious standpoint.
Yeah.
The thing about that, and I don't want to get too far afield here, because I know that folks were treated to a conversation about New York politics specifically, previous to our conversation here, but it will be interesting to see, just so in case people weren't aware, we have dueling redistricting plans put forward by the supposed independent bipartisan commission that was going to be not doing that. And instead, because redistricting is such a partisan exercise, which is impossible to actually separate the two, it didn't work out that way. But we've got these dueling plans, and Kathy Hochul's going to have to get involved, and she's been trying to play both sides. So this is a woman who comes out of Western New York, which is more like the Midwest than it is like Brooklyn, to be clear. Maybe more like, in some cases, Suffolk County, Cheektowaga is for certain, than it is like, I don't know, Babylon or what have you. But she's trying to, she's tiptoeing very closely along the line. And if she gets all the way in on a partisan battle, it's going to alienate those middle of the road or right of center Democrats. And where will they go? And now, they may have no choice. They're certainly not going to vote for Jumaane Williams. I highly doubt, right? If he gets the working families line and ends up in the November general election, and then it's him, Hochul, and whoever the Republican is. But it is very interesting. And I also wonder how much the Alvin Bragg, Manhattan DA, dust up right now. And he's definitely walking things back, given the crime situation or the violent situation that we've seen in New York. Although the high profile incidents do not actually tell the story of the fact that the numbers are down all across the board. The city is still very safe, at least as according to Eric Adams, but and the NYPD data. I wonder how that plays into the nationals, like what's going on in the rest of the country. I mean, we are seeing cities across the nation having similar problems, right?
I would first just say, as a proud Buffalonian who graduated from Syracuse University,
coin tosses are bad and need to be overturned.
As Kathy Hochul did, that New York is being treated to perhaps the glory years of governorships here in New York. Now, I jest, but one quick point, Kathy Hochul has no great incentive to get involved in the minutiae of redistricting. I mean, it's just not to her advantage. So don't expect that she's going to take any firm stand on that whatsoever.
Right.
I would just quickly say that, in Democrats, they like to use the term a lot. Well, we cannot unilaterally disarm. Okay, so they use redistricting very much as a messaging tool. Hey, we're going to do everything that we can to try to fix this horrible system with districts that just look absolutely ridiculous, and you can drive down a single street and enter like 4 different congressional districts in the span of 3 minutes. I mean, this stuff is real. And if we were designing our system of how to reapportion districts and congressional seats every 10 years, and we were starting from the beginning, would we design a system that looked like this? I don't think if you're a Republican or a Democrat, far left, far right, whatever, that you would say that this is a logical,
do it in a different way. Sure.
Right, sane system. So, but nevertheless, Democrats know that they're not going to win that battle. So yes, they're going to be incredibly aggressive in places such as New York State and Illinois and California, in places where they are very blue, and they're going to use gerrymandering and the tools of redistricting, again, subject to the rules of their states, which are different from state to state, to their greatest advantage that they possibly can, because at the national level, they do know the stakes. And as much as Democrats have great diversity within their own caucus, from the AOCs and the Premier Jayapals of the world, all the way on to the Joe Manchins and the Kirsten Sinemas, they they are running monolithically in 2022, in the sense that they are running to save their majorities. And short of Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, they pretty much want to get any Democrat over a Republican, and they're going to find any way that they possibly can to attempt to do that, even if they fail.
And they also have to,
go ahead, Robert.
No, I was just going to say, as bad as things look in the big picture, for Democrats, we're 10 months. We are still 10 months away from the election.
We could have a whole new variant.
There could be a whole new variant, and if you can win the game with like 13 seconds left, just to make an example here.
Way too soon.
10 months.
Very hurt still, Robert.
10 months is an eternity. Sorry, Dave. I apologize. But
I'm going to go off camera and cry for the next 12 minutes.
Why has no one introduced legislation about the coin toss? I'm surprised no one has introduced legislation for the coin toss.
Exactly. But no. So if the Democrats, while they're on the defense everywhere, they will, in the few areas where they can press their advantage, they certainly will. That's certainly true on the redistricting side, and they've still got some narrow opportunities. Bringing it back to DC, they've still got some narrow opportunities to get some things done. Whether it's trying to repair Build Back Better, or as we said before, the Supreme Court. I know, the lovely
what I do not understand about that is, why do they persist? Why is this a good strategy? You talk about things that can really help people. For example, the child tax credit. Child poverty, people were helped dramatically by COVID stimulus. Let's leave aside what you think about it from a politics standpoint, about whether it was right or wrong to send people money and blah, 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 blah. Kids were kept from poverty and brought out of poverty marginally as a result of, and their families as a result of those efforts. And if you really think, I was just listening to, again, a commentary about this. Nobody knows what the heck is in that Build Back Better bill. It's enormous. It's a big miasma of everything. It's like a kitchen sink, Cincinnati spaghetti thing. I don't even know what to use, the analogy to use there. I don't even know. That was terrible. But the point of the matter is, if there are things in there that the Democrats think that are beneficial, that Republicans, particularly a person like Manchin, who has a high poverty rate, for example, in his childhood poverty rate in his district, in his state, break them out, get some wins. Why are you insisting on this mega thing? You're like, oh, well, we're going to just sort of pare it down. Don't pare it down, break it out. Why?
Okay, I can tell you why.
Good.
They don't have the time. By Memorial Day, there's going to be no legislation passed. As a matter of fact, for Build Back Better, there is some thinking. They want to shrink it down. They want to give it another shot, right? They put a lot of their credibility and prestige on this, right? They want to get it done, but they probably have to get it done by the State of the Union, or it's just not going to happen, because they have three things they want to take care of, right? One is it used to be called the endless frontiers, the China competition bill. Okay, the House just passed it. The Senate has a version. They want to try to do that. The question is whether they can get the votes from the Republicans to do this, right? But that's a big thing they want to do, because China's a big issue here in Washington, right? The other thing they want to do is they really do want to try to get this Build Back Better thing, because they put so much into it. But I just don't know how possible that is. And the third
It's
thing,
not.
the third thing that they're going to probably focus on is the Electoral Count Act, because what they want to do is they want to close all those loopholes that Trump and his folks tried to exploit back on January 6th. I think that's going to be a high priority for them. Whether they can get that passed, it's going to be kind of up to how far they want to go with the various provisions in the bill and how deep into the states and that sort of thing. So, I mean, those are three things that they're looking at, right? And they've got a Memorial Day almost drop dead deadline, because you can't go beyond that, right? Because then it just turns into politics, right?
Right.
So I think that's what they're kind of focusing on. However, they also have two other big problems, right? February 18th, the government runs out of money.
Oh,
It's a thing called a continuing resolution, but basically just as a stopgap spending bill. Okay, so that's one time. But then they've got to do it again before September 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year for the federal government. So they have two big fiscal bills that they also have to deal with. And so, I mean, that is pretty much their legislative. I mean, there's going to be other things that they'll try, but the reality is those are the things that they're probably going to focus on.
So okay, so I also, when at the outset, Jackie reminded us of sort of like what our goals were here, and it's very broad, obviously, sort of like what's going on in DC, what the forecast is for 2022. We've talked about that. One thing that we haven't touched on that I do want to touch on, because there's so many interesting players, is people to watch out for in the coming year. And obviously we've talked about some of the players, but one of the things that, and this is a left field one, but one of the things I'm interested in is Nancy Pelosi just like dropped this bomb. Hey, I'm running for re-election. Like, it was so like, oh, out of nowhere. I read it in the Wall Street Journal and I was like, oh, that's kind of apropos of nothing. She didn't say anything about what she was going to do with leadership. But again, we have an interest as New Yorkers because Hakeem Jeffries is supposedly in line.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. And here's what I think is really interesting about that is she did it after the 29th Democrat who's in the House said he wasn't going to run again. Right. Jim Cooper of Tennessee, right? And I think it was just try to stanch the loss of members. I'm not even sure she's going to follow through. But I do
know that her staking around encourages other members to stick around. Some of them would prefer to see her go.
Well, like Kathleen Rice out of Long Island, right? I mean, she's voted against Pelosi just about every time. But I hear what you're saying. But I do think it was a big messaging thing. Think of it that way.
Yeah. Okay. No, Tom, I think you're exactly right. And it works in two ways. Cooper ended up retiring apropos of our previous conversation because he was basically redistricted out as happened in a number of places. When you're a member of leadership, particularly if you are if you're the speaker or you're the minority leader, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be in a very, very safe seat. And it's happened a number of times where the leader runs for re-election, and the very next day announces that they're retiring because they know that there's going to be a special election, and whoever follows them is going to be a Democrat.
Cynical.
But it's important. What?
You're so cynical.
No, but I mean, they do this.
It's true. I know it's true.
They do this though because they don't want to. They've already got the Democrats already have 30 members retiring. They don't want to see the leader. They don't want to see the general also sending a signal that she's stepping down as well. But I would not be surprised that they run, and particularly, as seems likely now, the Democrats lose the House, and she announces that she's not going to run for re-election. By the way, something similar happened in let me remember correctly now in 1998 when when Republicans lost seats. They didn't lose the House. They lost seats. And then Speaker Newt Gingrich ran for re-election and then announced his resignation a few weeks afterwards.
Okay, so let's play a little game. We'll start with you, Dave. People to watch that you'll be interested in, could be anybody. I mean, also, if you want to talk about Donald Trump as majority leader, I guess you could talk about that. Personally, that terrifies me. So I think that we should not talk about that, but you could talk about whatever you want. 3 people, let's do that. 3 people you'll be looking for or interested in or tracking, could be anybody in the next year.
Well, start with somebody we haven't mentioned yet, and that's Representative Benny Thompson of Mississippi, who is at the vanguard, the knife's edge of the January 6th Commission. Now,
Right.
This is not legislation, but,
Right.
but
Nope.
this is, well, per se, but this is going to be, I think, a monumental storyline in 2022, in the sense that they're overperforming. I don't think, even the most hardcore Democrats had great aspirations for this committee to really, bring home the bacon, so to speak. There was attempts to have a truly bipartisan commission that was going to deeply investigate the root causes, et cetera, of the attack on the U.S. Capitol. That, of course, did not come to fruition. So we had this more scaled down and demonstrably more partisan committee that was set up. But they are being very aggressive. They are subpoenaing people left and right. They're causing a lot of headaches for Republicans. And if there's a win that Democrats are looking for, well, this actually might be kind of a sleeper win for them, in the sense that they're going to reveal truths about what happened on January 6th and before, that could be very problematic for Republicans. So I would say Benny Thompson in particular is somebody to definitely keep an eye on, even if we're not talking about him in any electoral 2022 midterm sense.
Good.
Next, I would go back to Nancy Pelosi, because even if she is going to win her election without any trouble whatsoever by 40 percentage points or whatever the case may be, at the risk of being just for a moment self-promotional, we published a project last month at Insider called Conflicted Congress. And the bottom line with what we revealed in Conflicted Congress over the course of about 40 different stories that we had published is that there are dozens and dozens of members of Congress who have violated this law called the Stock Act. It's called Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act. We found almost 200 senior level congressional staffers who had also violated it. And it's a law that is supposed to defend against conflicts of interest, financial conflicts of interest in Congress. And it's just, people are just driving a truck through it on the left and on the right. If you're looking for something bipartisan in Washington, you have found it in all the wrong ways with this particular issue. And we asked Nancy Pelosi last month at a press conference about our findings. And we said, well, we put the question to her, should members of Congress be able to buy and sell stocks of companies that are lobbying the federal government, that vie for huge government contracts, and that the members of Congress get a great deal of insider information about? And she said, it's a free market economy. I'm paraphrasing, but she said, it's a free market economy. Members of Congress should be able to participate in that. And the blowback that she got was incredible. And Republicans have way outflanked Democrats on this issue and are beginning to make this a campaign issue. Read some stories that we have coming in the pipeline, which will expound that on a little bit. But I would expect that Nancy Pelosi on this particular issue, you're going to see some stuff here that is not going to reflect well on Democrats, and Republicans who we've talked to are like, well, she's wrong. And we're going to point that out at every turn.
Wait, hold on, gentlemen, hold on. I think that this is a safe place for me to bow out, because I have to unfortunately leave early. But again, remember, it's supposed to be 3, but I think you're going to run over if you go to 3. So
I'm going to say what
you're going to say.
Benny Thompson,
2.
Nancy Pelosi, go.
Okay, and Robert, you're going to go next. Tom, you're going to end up with everybody. I trust you all. Don't go crazy now. All of you, behave. Okay. Jackie,
Yes,
thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. I'm terribly sorry I have to run. but it's always fun. Unfortunately, it's never enough time. Maybe we should do this next year. Bye.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Thanks a lot.
Exactly. Before I announce my, I guess we'll try and keep it down to two. But Dave, you're absolutely right on the Stock Act. And what was particularly dumb, I think we can use that word, for Pelosi to say that is there's actually a reform measure that Democrat John Ossoff in the Senate is pushing on this, and she just basically completely stepped on it. So she steps on her own colleague in the Senate, his reform measure, while giving a great talking point to Republicans, particularly when there have been examples of egregious stock issues amongst Republicans and Democrats over the last couple of years, and to allow the Republicans to get the edge on this is like really foolish on her part. But to speak to Liz's question, one name we've mentioned sort of in passing, but I think we should definitely still keep an eye on is the mayor of New York, is Eric Adams. He's a controversial. He's less than 1 month in office. He's already a controversial figure amongst Democrats in New York. But he wants to take his message of sort of working class, tough on crime, pro crypto Democrat nationally. And next week, the president is going to be coming to New York to talk with the mayor about the violence issues, the shooting issues here, and they've got some similar brands that overlap on that somewhat moderate, tough on crime Democrat lane. So keep an eye on Eric Adams this week and for the rest of the year. And also to co-sign what Dave said about the January 6th commission. But I'd also say that my person would be Liz Cheney. Not only does she, and to a lesser extent Adam Kinzinger, give that commission the desperate bipartisan patina that it actually needs. She is a really, Thompson obviously is the chairman, but this is one case where her being co-chairman or vice chairman, it's not just in name only. She's really, really good in pushing what's coming out of the commission. And as much as the Republicans hate her, they can't ignore that she's been a solid conservative for all of her time in Congress, and she's speaking truth. It's really hard for Republicans to spin that, and that is going to be the unexpected issue that could color the rest of particularly the second half of this year.
Okay, great picks all the way around so far. I tell you what, I'm going to be watching closely Chuck Schumer, and for a couple of reasons. I mentioned earlier he'd gotten a little criticism, and there's some grumbling among some of his caucus. But the reality is that he really has accomplished some amazing things. A $1.9 trillion COVID relief act, 2 months into Biden's administration, right? And he's pushed some other things through, right? And I think he has a great opportunity with this Supreme Court nomination to manage the Senate floor in a way to make sure that Mitch McConnell, who's a master at parliamentary procedure, does not stop it or prolong it too much. And I think this is a big opportunity for him. And he's absolutely a pro about judicial affairs, because since he got into the Senate back in 1999, he's been a big active player in judicial nominations. So I'm looking forward to that. Another person that actually there's some people locally that I think are going to be very interesting. I think Robert Zimmerman running for Congress in the 3rd Congressional District on Long Island. That's a very interesting thing. He's going up against John Kamen, who's also very well known on Long Island. That's going to be an interesting race. And I think we're all going to be watching Joe Biden to see how he reacts to the criticism he's gotten and how he pushes forward. Now, he's gotten a little bit of wind behind his sails. I think just this morning, it turned out that for 2021, it was a 5.7% economic boost, the biggest since 1984. I mean, if people start feeling that, that can help begin to turn around, because it's always the economy, right? And so I think we're going to be watching that. Plus, who he picks and how he goes about promoting the Supreme Court candidate, I think is going to be something to watch. I think it's going to be very interesting. And I think it's down basically to 2 people, but we'll see. Because the third person I would choose would be Jim Clyburn and his influence over the president on this pick. So that's my choice.
All right, then. Okay, I am no Liz Benjamin. I don't pretend to be. But if it's all right with you folks, we have a couple minutes left. So I would like to throw out the last question, which is basically, is there anything we didn't touch on that you want to say or let people know? Could be about anything. And I'm also wondering, for you guys in Washington, what is the mood inside Washington these days? How would you describe it? So who wants to start?
I'll jump in to say that one storyline we'll be tracking very closely is Pete Buttigieg, and he now has to do something pretty monumental in and of itself, which is manage this gigantic infrastructure package that has been passed. He's going to be the key person as Secretary of Transportation in this regard, and the guy is 40 years old. He has his whole political career in front of him. He could be running for president in 2060, and that would not be a weird thing under current standards. And he has great ambition. So if Joe Biden decides not to run for re-election in 2024, and Kamala Harris has competition, it may come in the form very well of Pete Buttigieg. So in a way, Pete Buttigieg's moment to build and pad what is, I think fair to say a thin resume as a mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and then a presidential candidate, and then not much else. He's got a big opportunity for him right now. So keep an eye on him.
Okay.
Robert?
I'd agree with Dave. One of the interesting thing about Buttigieg, even going back to the campaign, is that of all national Democrats, he's the one that is the most comfortable going on Fox News and kind of breaking down what are usually considered sort of Democratic talking points into sort of a kind of a, I won't even say folksy, but sort of a kind of a straightforward, almost working class kind of language that sometimes convinces even those people who might not necessarily be with him. The other person, somebody to keep an eye on, sort of from a negative sense, is and Dave kind of mentioned this, is Kamala Harris, who I think almost anybody, other than Joe Biden's sliding numbers, I think her star has sort of fallen the most over the last year, and there's always, the question came up in the Biden news conference about whether he was going to keep her on, and we're only 1 year into the administration, so it had to kind of keep an eye out. Is she going to be going out on the road, campaigning for candidates? Do candidates want her to campaign for her? Is going to be something to keep an eye on as well.
Tom?
Okay, I think I'll just mention that we haven't touched on this at all, but with Russia on the border of the Ukraine and a seeming impasse so far, we know how foreign interventions, foreign war making can influence domestic politics. And I think that's kind of hanging over this. I think that Biden is hopeful that this can be resolved through negotiation. But I think it's a very interesting standoff, and that could have great reverberations through the next couple of years.
Okay. And Tom, how would you describe the mood in Washington right now?
I think the mood in Washington right now is a certain level of frustration that yesterday kind of flipped for Democrats to something more positive, because I think they're excited about the possibility of being able to show their differences with the Republicans through a pick of a Black woman for the Supreme Court, the first ever to serve. And I think that right now there's kind of a brief giddiness about that. I think reality will sink in, probably by Friday. But but right now, I do think that's just given kind of a little bounce.
Got it. All right.
Would you agree with that, Dave? You're here, right?
I am. I would very, very much concur. And it's not the happiest, sunniest time to be in Washington, D.C. No question.
Okay. And on that note, we do need to wrap up. We're at time. As always, it's an honor to host you, gentlemen. Thank you for an interesting, an entertaining, and a very informative conversation. And I hope you will join us again sometime soon. And also thanks to Liz for so expertly moderating and handling the three of you. Dave, sometimes loss happens. What can I tell you? Just hang in there. So thanks so much. And tomorrow's program, we turn our focus.
Thanks, Jackie.
Oh, thank you. Tomorrow's program, we turn our focus into the importance on local news. So we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Yep.